Ding dong, the witch is dead. Man, oh man. She's gonna retire, but her legacy's gonna live on, chat.
The galaxy has quietly breathed a sigh of relief. After nearly 14 years of creative chaos, corporate middling, and some of the most divisive Star Wars content in recent memory, Kathleen Kennedy is stepping down as president of Lucasfilm. The architect of the Disney era, from The Force Awakens to Andor, is...
The girl bossing might actually be over, and we're actually just gonna have girls that have substantive personalities and good script writing, as opposed to being fucking literal Mary Sues that can do anything and everything that men can do and also better, and all the men around them are stupid and retarded. That's literally what they do, by the way. I'm not even kidding. I hate that, honestly. Like, imagine if they did that with all the fucking characters, like, across the board. I wouldn't watch any damn movies. Yo, Smash, thank you for the 10 gifted, by the way. Thank you so much.
Finally handing over the reins. And after how mismanaged her reign of terror was, fans are surely going to be skeptical of who's next.
Who the fuck are you?
Kennedy was what you could call a competent butcher. On the business side, she shepherded Disney's Star Wars into the streaming age, as well as a few blockbuster hits. But her tenure was mostly marked by a staggering amount of creative whiplash. Canceled projects.
What about The Power of One? Is anybody going to talk about that? How it was a monumental, disgusting, stupid failure?
Contradictory directions created a landscape where even the most loyal fans checked out halfway through the sequel era. So yes, for many of us who spent years watching Lucasfilm flail and fail, Kennedy's departure feels more like a cosmic reset button. It feels glorious. There's also a
I don't think that her leaving is going to make that much of an impact. I'm not gonna lie. It's like I don't know, what's a good analogy? Like, I don't know, it's a cancerous tumor, but you don't know if there's other cancerous tumors that grow around the cancerous tumor. You have to make sure. You need to keep, like, giving the person chemotherapy. Like, you can't ever be sure unless you test for it.
Reality we inevitably have to face. Who comes next matters a lot. As it turns out, Disney won't be handing Lucasfilm to some rogue auteur with a trench coat and an undo button. They are handing it to Dave Filoni, raconteur of the animated trenches, architect of everything Mandalorian and Ahsoka, and now co-president, creative leader of the entire franchise. But let's be clear, relief isn't trust. Fans feel strongly about what kind of creative mind takes the reins.
Not fucking rocket science! True. None of you would know about rocket scientists.
Some people argued with me saying like, oh, Chris Metzen coming back to Blizzard and working on the narrative team is going to change Blizzard's story structure and make it great again. And I'm just sitting here like, do you realize he still has to work with like at least 20 to 50 other people on the game? It's not just him anymore. Because back in the day when WoW was WoW, it was Chris Metzen and like 5 other people that created like narrative decisions and like other like smaller people. Now he has to go through a bunch of other people for his ideas, and it sucks in my opinion, because he said that in an interview talking about like the narrative direction that the game went through when he quit the game or quit the company to like, you know, chill out a little bit. He, like, basically said, like, yeah, I have all these ideas, but people really don't like them, so now we have to do this, like, median thing where we work together. I'm like, oh, here we go. Here we go. Chris Metzen has to listen to a bunch of other people instead of just fucking handing the reins over and letting him do what he wants. Because that's what's gonna happen. You can't, like, have a replacement like that. They're just gonna, like... Yeah, it's basically like a committee.
Because you're all fucking retards, probably.
And just because Kennedy's era shook the foundations doesn't mean Filoni's vision will be the redemption arc everyone's praying for.
Yeah.
In fact, that's exactly why we should be cautious before uncorking the celebration bottle. Disney, after all, is prone to smacking itself in the face. Before Kathleen Kennedy became the most...
Whoa! Ow! That must have been a nice freaking kiss, dude.
Polarizing executive in modern franchise history, She built her career the safest, most insulated way Hollywood allows, by attaching herself to geniuses and never being one of them. Kennedy entered the industry in the late 1970s as a production assistant, and very quickly found her way into the orbit of Steven Spielberg. This wasn't dumb luck, but it also wasn't creative destiny. She was organized, reliable, and good at making chaos look manageable. Skills Hollywood rewards aggressively because they keep the money flowing. From there, she rose through the ranks on Spielberg-adjacent projects like E.T., Poltergeist, and The Color Purple, moving from assistant to associate producer to producer without ever being asked to define the creative soul of any of them. That distinction matters. Kennedy's ascent wasn't about ideas or themes. It wasn't about storytelling instincts. It was about logistics, mediation, and risk reduction. She wasn't hired to ask, what should this movie be? She was hired to make sure whatever Spielberg decided didn't fall apart. In Hollywood, that role doesn't make you famous.
She failed that completely. They took a big fat dump all over his baby, man.
But it makes you indispensable.
He even said it himself, didn't he? Like, he actually came out in an interview and was like, yeah, I don't like this, where the direction went, bro.
Her most consequential move came when she co-founded Amblin Entertainment with Spielberg and Frank Marshall. Again, notice the pattern. Kennedy wasn't the visionary at the table, she was the stabilizer. The one who spoke studio, soothed the egos, and ensured that massive production stayed on schedule and on budget. Over time, that reputation hardened into something far more powerful than creative credit: institutional trust. And with trust came leverage. Kennedy spent decades producing or overseeing some of the most iconic franchises in cinema history. Jurassic Park, Back to the Future, Indiana Jones. But she didn't build these worlds. She managed them and made sure they survived the machinery of blockbuster filmmaking intact.
And that's what happens. That Steve Jobs quote of when he talks about how corporates take over businesses, how much they change the direction of the company when all you do is make this one great thing. They want you to keep mass producing this one great thing and milking it forever, essentially. It's sad, dude. It's sad.
But executives love people like that because they don't disrupt legacy IP, they preserve it. And oh, how things would change. But that's precisely why George Lucas saw her as the ideal successor. When Lucas was preparing to sell Lucasfilm to Disney, he didn't want a wild card. He wanted someone who understood franchises as assets, not myths. Someone who wouldn't challenge the corporate reality of what Star Wars had become. Kennedy was handed the presidency in 2012, not because she had a bold vision for the galaxy far, far away, but because she could be trusted not to torch it. Again.
Yeah, about that.
Oh, the irony. She was ultimately rewarded for decades of being safe, deferential, and politically bulletproof. The problem is that Star Wars didn't need a corporate steward, it needed a guiding philosophy. When you spend your entire career managing other people's visions, you don't suddenly develop one of your own at the scale Star Wars demands. You manage by committee. You pivot midstream, you hedge, and when the dust settles, you're left with a franchise that technically functions, but spiritually, it fractures. So
to be fair, it was a slow burn. I'd argue, I don't know, I feel like 15 years is not a slow burn. I feel like people noticed Star Wars sucking probably already by like 2020. And that's not a really long time. That's like 5 to 6 years since she like picked up the reins. It fucking exploded when TLJ came out. Yeah, I want to say like it wasn't really a slow burn. Like, yeah, time-wise she stayed for a pretty long time up until this point. But you just compared to like what came out before it, all the movies that she was involved in, like before she became a CEO or freaking the president, whatever.
No, Kathleen Kennedy didn't stumble into power. She earned it the Hollywood way. The real question is whether that path ever made her the right person to wield it. Answer, fuck no. So what is Kathleen Kennedy's real legacy at Lucasfilm? If you look past the glossy press releases and corporate bullet points about box office dollars, you won't be seeing a masterclass in stewardship. It's more of a pattern of damaged intellectual properties, self-justification, fan-blaming, and a flat-out refusal to take responsibility for what went wrong. Kennedy has publicly framed much of the backlash to her tenure as the work of a very...
And again, you look at the articles that came out in the last 5 years about Star Wars failing, they always blame the audience. Gosh, I want to look it up right now. Star Wars blames their own fans. Kathleen Kennedy blames fans' misogynist bots for Star Wars backlash. January 15th, 2026. I'm gonna put it on the screen just in case you don't fucking believe me. Like, she does not fucking care about you. She does not care. She just wanted a buck. She worked there for a really long time, but she had no passion. She thinks every single one of the people that didn't like Mary Sue, Ray Sue, is a fucking misogynist and an incel. She doesn't say incel because probably not PR worthy, you know.
Very small percentage of Star Wars fans with enormous expectations. People she suggests simply couldn't be satisfied if Lucasfilm chose to go in new creative directions. But that explanation barely holds up to scrutiny. If it really was a fringe minority upset by imagined grievances, Star Wars wouldn't have disappeared from theaters for years after the rise of Skywalker, nor would Disney have drastically curtailed big screen releases and pulled back on content budgets. The backlash was structural, certainly not marginal. And here's the kicker. Kennedy herself undercuts her own argument. In that same interview, she admitted that the negative reaction to The Last Jedi was significant enough to scare off director Rian Johnson from returning to the franchise.
Yeah. Because he did an awful job. Why do we keep people who are bad at their job? Dude, the milk thing with... I've never actually watched it in its entirety. I've probably looked at many clips of the fucking movies with freaking Rey. I maybe watched one in its entirety, but even I can't remember it. But the green milk scene actually made me think it was a parody. And this was before AI was a thing, so I was like, damn, they really made him do that?
Action hardly consistent with the idea of only a small percentage of dissatisfied fans. Instead of acknowledging that the storytelling under her watch routinely lost its way, Kennedy pointed fingers at bots, at alleged misogynistic backlash, at online toxicity. That's a classic modern corporate dodge. Blame the reaction to the product instead of admitting that the product itself was the problem. And the damage wasn't limited to Star Wars. Under her leadership, Lucasfilm failed to deliver on numerous projects.
What blows my mind is, like, if you compare the food industry, which is like $1 billion industry, if a product changes so much that the customer stop buying it, most companies will revert back to what it was within, like, maybe, like, I would even argue, like, months. Because obviously you can't, like, change everything on a dime in a day, because of how factories work. But with Coca-Cola very slightly changed their formula, and people stopped buying Coca-Cola for, like, a couple of months, or, like, they noticed a drastic dip, and they immediately changed it back as pretty much as soon as possible because they fucking love money. Why do they not treat art and media in the same way? Why not?
Films to underperforming expansions of the universe, leaving a trail of high-profile flops and fan alienation. Kennedy may have racked up billions in gross revenue with the hype and nostalgia the sequel trilogy brought in, granted with degrading returns for each movie, but legacy isn't measured in dollars alone. It's measured in sustained audience engagement, respect for the source material, and honesty about failures, all of which are glaringly absent from her exit narrative. It's one thing to lead a franchise into new territory. It's another to refuse accountability when that territory turns out to be a black hole. The question is if Lucasfilm can ever recover from a leadership style that spent years blaming the fans instead of fixing the franchise. When you zoom out and look at Star Wars under Kathleen Kennedy's leadership, the most damning thing isn't any single movie or controversy. It's the overall erosion of confidence in the brand itself. Star Wars used to be an event, a cultural punctuation mark. Under Kennedy, it became a content stream that was inconsistent in tone and increasingly disposable.
Because there's too many cooks in the kitchen. That's also part of it. They don't have, like, the love that fucking that Lucas put in there, man. It's depressing. Like, yeah, obviously he can't make movies forever. I'm not saying that he has to. Like, sometimes people just have to fucking retire and do something else. Go fucking, I don't know, eat some ice cream with your grandkids. But they just completely clubbed it over the head.
Films contradicted one another. Trilogies were launched without an endgame. Characters were introduced, discarded, resurrected, and recontextualized so often that emotional investment became optional.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we call that dilution. Under Lucasfilm, the franchise suffered from a chronic lack of unified vision.
And you know what's funny? Blizzard did this as well. Like, they had to bring back dead characters because it's like, look, Soypog, it's just like when it was 15 years ago, guys. Oh my god, wow, we brought back this character that everybody saw die. We have to bring it back. It's the same thing. Like, I could name other examples, but that's the first thing that pops in my mind because I'm passionate about it. And Star Wars, like, even though I am aware of the franchise and I know the lore and the story and I've been keeping track of it relatively decently for, like, a normie in that space, there's a lot of people that talk in my chat and in my comments that are like, yeah, they fucking ruined it. Like, that's what they do. That's what they do. They want to, like, make you soy pog and consume the content. They're like, oh my god, look, they brought him back. Consume, he's back.
Projects were announced with fanfare, then quietly canceled. Directors were hired, fired, rehired, and replaced mid-development. Entire eras of storytelling were teased and then abandoned. Fans stopped believing announcements because history taught them not to. Even commercially, the warning signs were obvious. After the rise of Skywalker, Star Wars vanished from theaters entirely. Not paused or recalibrated, just, gone. A franchise that once anchored release calendars suddenly couldn't justify a single theatrical rollout. Instead, the IP retreated to streaming, where overexposure further flattened its impact and made Star Wars feel routine rather than special. Worse still, the mythology itself lost coherence. Rules changed when convenient. Legacy characters were reframed in ways that fractured the audience. New characters were introduced without the narrative patience required to make them stick. All the while
changing things canonically, so it's like, oh, it's ambiguous. He was actually a bad guy. He was just misunderstood. He's actually a good guy. Like, that's what I also hate about, like, more modern media. It's like, evil characters just can't be evil. They have to be, like, morally ambiguous.
Leadership treated criticism as hostility. This is the core of the damage Kennedy leaves behind. Star Wars still exists, but its authority is gone. The brand no longer commands goodwill by default. It has to earn it again, project by project, decision by decision. And that's a devastating place for a once mythic franchise to be. If there is one chapter that permanently defines Kathleen Kennedy's tenure at Lucasfilm, it's the sequel trilogy. Something that should have been a vaunted next step and instead became a case study in executive malpractice. From the jump, this trilogy was launched without a plan. No overarching story, no mapped character arcs, no thematic through line. Kennedy greenlit Star Wars The Force.
They just regurgitate stuff that already exists. They can't come up with anything original.
Awakens as a nostalgia-forward reset, then handed the next installment to a director with a fundamentally opposing philosophy. Star Wars The Last Jedi didn't just subvert expectations, it actively dismantled narrative groundwork laid by its predecessor. Instead of course-correcting or enforcing cohesion, Kennedy allowed the trilogy to eat itself alive in real time. The result was panic and creative reversal, until finally came Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, a film so visibly stitched together that it played like a corporate apology tour rather than a finale. Plot lines were retconned or outright ignored, character motivations flipped scene to scene, stakes evaporated. Whatever your feelings on individual entries, the sequels as a whole became indefensible as a trilogy. Its failure was blamed on toxic fandom, but this was a leadership failure. Kathleen Kennedy's job was to ensure continuity, direction, and narrative discipline. Instead, she prioritized letting creatives cook without checking whether they were even using the same recipe. And the fallout—
Why do the fights look so freaking just not good? We'll look at them later in comparison. Like, I'm gonna bring up like a modern big showdown and then compare it to like an old ass freaking like from the 2000s. What is it called? Episode 4 or 3? Whichever one it was. That one was so hype. With Darth Maul.
Speaks for itself. Audience trust completely collapsed. Merchandise sales dropped. Theatrical Star Wars went dormant. An entire generation of fans now associates the sequel era not with wonder, but with frustration.
I'm sorry, that's just funny to me.
And fragmentation.
The fact that they had to make the actor do that.
That's Kennedy's sequel trilogy legacy. Not one bad movie, but 3 movies that prove what happens when no one is actually in charge. The sad part is that Star Wars is still paying for it. If the sequel trilogy cracked the foundation, the Acolyte took a sledgehammer to whatever structural integrity Star Wars had.
This movie was just not movie. Sorry, I shouldn't say movie. A series was awful. Just absolutely heinous.
Left. This was supposed to be Bold, a prestige High Republic era series that would finally prove Lucasfilm could tell a mature, grounded story outside the Skywalker shadow. Instead, The Acolyte arrived as a tonal mess, a narrative slog, and worst of all, a punchline. It wasn't controversial in an interesting way, not divisive in a challenging way, just a deeply unserious, hilarious mess. From incoherent character motivations to amateurish dialogue and baffling pacing, the show felt less like a carefully crafted expansion of the Star Wars mythos and more like a creatively unvetted
they bent the rules for the fucking Force for this
experiment dumped onto Disney Plus and left to fend for itself. Viewership dropped fast, engagement evaporated. Talk of lore and themes couldn't be found in online discussion. It centered on memes and disbelief. And that's the most telling part. The Acolyte wasn't quietly ignored.
And that's what I hate about modern media too. Fucking memes. Putting in memes that just don't age at all. They can't, like, imagine if they put in memes from like the 2000s into Lord of the Rings for the sake of it, man. Imagine how that would age now. You can't do that. Like, fucking reference like that. They don't age well. Nobody's gonna fucking watch it in like 20 years and be like, ha, that's funny, Lamau.
Or faded slowly into the ever-expanding Star Wars content graveyard. Lucasfilm and Disney did something unusually blunt. They publicly announced it would not receive a second season, which is hardly standard industry practice. They basically took it out back and shot it. Studios usually let failures drift away quietly to avoid spotlighting them, but here the Acolyte was effectively mercy killed on the runway for everyone to see. That decision said it all. It wasn't merely underperforming, it was brand toxic. Continuing it risked reinforcing the perception that Lucasfilm had lost all quality control. So they cut bait, took the PR hit, and moved on. And make no mistake, the Acolyte wasn't an outlier. It was
the actress, the main actress that was playing this, couldn't shut the hell up, and she kept blaming every single fucking media outlet for criticizing it, including the fans, saying like, you guys just don't appreciate, you guys are just a bunch of bigots.
Logical endpoint of years of leadership that mistook
the fire thing. Oh my god, we watched this clip, man. This the fire.
New for good and dismissed criticism as hostility. In that sense, The Acolyte isn't just a bad show, it's an indictment. And at this point, Star Wars isn't charging boldly into the future, but rather...
Yo, Vero! Hi! Yo, what up, Raiders? How are you doing? Thank you for the raid. I appreciate it. Hi. We're watching a video shitting all over Star Wars because Kathleen Kennedy finally left. And as a parting gift, she said everyone that criticized her Star Wars legacy is a bigot and a misogynist, and they hate women. Did you know that? Yeah. Yeah. Kathleen's gone, but like her legacy lives on. I hope you guys had a great stream. Thank you for the raid.
They're clinging to life, and that life raft has a name: The Mandalorian and Grogu. This movie isn't just any old release.
Grogu.
No, it's a stress test, a referendum, the closest thing Lucasfilm has to a Hail Mary pass after years of misfires. Because like it or not, The Mandalorian, and by extension Grogu, is the last somewhat embraced pillar the franchise has left. It's the one Star Wars property that broke through the noise, pulled lapsed fans back in, and reminded people what this universe used to feel like. Well, Season 1 did, at least. That's why everything feels so precarious right now. Lucasfilm isn't betting on a bold new era or an untested creative vision. They're betting on familiarity and goodwill, on the hope that audiences will show up one more time for characters they already trust. And the stakes couldn't be higher. If The Mandalorian and Grogu succeeds, it gives Lucasfilm breathing room and buys some credibility. It creates the illusion, fair or not, that Star Wars can...
I think The Mandalorian in general brought back a lot of people into like being like, yeah, Star Wars is awesome. It's kind of like what happened with The Witcher, with how awesome the first season, well, not the entire season, but I think that it was good enough that good enough adaptation that people really enjoyed it and were willing to overlook the flaws of the actual writing and stuff and like casting decisions that people made. Yeah, I really liked it, but there were some things that I really just didn't like about it. Just some of the pacing and the writing.
still function as a theatrical brand.
Yeah.
But if it fails, if audiences shrug or worse, reject it outright, then the implications are brutal. Because if this doesn't work, if the most popular modern Star Wars characters spun out of the most successful Disney Plus series can't carry a movie, then what possibly can? What happens to the countless announced films still floating in development limbo? What executive greenlights another theatrical gamble when the safest bet on the board collapses? That's an uncomfortable truth. Star Wars isn't rebuilding right now, it's holding its breath. And The Mandalorian and Grogu is the exhale that determines whether this franchise keeps going or quietly retreats from theaters for good. And if Star Wars represents a franchise slowly bleeding out, Indiana Jones was outright put out of its misery under Kathleen Kennedy's watch. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny was supposed to be a victory lap, a respectful send-off for one of cinema's most iconic characters. Instead, it arrived as a bloated, joyless slog that managed the near impossible task of making Indiana Jones feel irrelevant in his own movie.
Yeah, and he is again not the star of the show. He's an old bumbling retard basically, and everybody around him is like, how did you become Indiana Jones? You're just such a fucking idiot. Like, why do they fucking do that? Why did they disrespect them like that? Oh, I don't know how you became this old and like geriatric and stupid. What are you, dumb?
The charm was gone. The adventure felt obligatory rather than inspired, and whatever spark Harrison Ford still brought to the role was buried under digital de-aging gimmicks and a script that seemed actively embarrassed by its hero. Creatively, the film was a mess, tonally confused.
Dude, Harrison Ford is so old. I didn't even realize. Holy crap.
Emotionally hollow, obsessed with deconstruction instead of celebration. It didn't feel like an Indiana Jones movie so much as a post-mortem, conducted by people who fundamentally misunderstood why the character worked in the first place. Adventure was replaced with melancholy, wonder
Indiana
was
Jones.
Replaced with lectures,
When he was
and
a
fun,
kid.
the one non-negotiable ingredient, was nowhere to be found. But the real catastrophe came at the box office. Dial of Destiny wasn't just a disappointment, it was a financial disaster. Thanks to ballooning production costs, extensive reshoots, and an
Yeah, the CGI Harrison Ford. Yeah, I bet that wasn't cheap, huh?
absurdly high budget. The film needed an unrealistic global haul just to break even, and it didn't come close. Audiences stayed home and word of mouth cratered, and what should have been a triumphant farewell became one of Disney's most embarrassing
What's this guy's name? The guy that this guy is? He always plays a villain. It makes me think he's like Russian or like Eastern European. But I'm pretty sure he's like Nordic. Mads Mikkelsen, dude, he's really good. He's got that fucking stereotypical kind of like almost evil like demeanor. He's a great actor. Yeah, I like him.
Triumphant farewell became one of Disney's most embarrassing theatrical flops. And it wasn't franchise fatigue. No, it was gross mismanagement.
Yeah.
Kennedy took a beloved legacy IP, ignored the lessons of its past, spent recklessly, and delivered a product nobody asked for at a price point that guaranteed failure. So when people talk about Kathleen Kennedy's legacy, Indiana Jones belongs front and center, because she didn't just stumble with it, she ended it expensively, publicly, and without dignity. If you want the purest example of how catastrophically Kathleen Kennedy mishandled Lucasfilm IP, look no further than Willow, a revival so badly misjudged that Disney effectively tried to erase it from existence. The original Willow...
What is Willow? I've never heard of this.
Willow wasn't Star Wars level iconic, but it had something valuable. Goodwill, a cult fantasy classic, a loyal fan base, a tone that balanced sincerity and adventure.
Have I seen this before? It's a really old fantasy film. When did it come out? Willow release date 1988. They re-released it in December of 2020. No, sorry, 2022. Huh, I never heard of it. Huh, interesting.
The Disney Plus series took all that and replaced it with tonal confusion, modern snark, shit dialogue, and storytelling that felt openly contemptuous of the world it was supposedly expanding. Instead of honoring the spirit of the original, the show felt like it was embarrassed by it. Fantasy tropes were undercut with irony. Emotional beats were smothered.
They took it off? It did that badly? Dude, that must be so fucking terrible. They literally just don't want people to see it. The fact that I didn't even hear of this, and I'm pretty on top of stuff like with like release shows and like remakes and stuff. This is 2022 to 23. Yeah, they just literally just took it off.
by quips. World building took a backseat to vibes and messaging, man.
Wow.
And the result was alienating. Longtime fans rejected it. New viewers didn't show up. Word of mouth collapsed almost immediately. But what happened next is what truly makes Willow infamous. Rather than letting the show quietly fade away like most failed streaming experiments, Disney and Lucasfilm made the unprecedented decision to remove it entirely from Disney Plus. Not
You're
canceled.
guilty.
White.
That's guilty. Like, leave it up. Like, just, I don't know. They actually probably cost calculated the fucking, what is it called? The PR damage. And they were like, you know what? Just fucking nuke it from orbit. Fuck it.
As of now, there is no legal way to watch the series. No physical release, no digital storefront, just nothing. Studios don't do that unless something has gone catastrophically wrong. Removing content isn't just an admission of failure. It's a declaration that the asset is worth less than the residuals and server costs required to keep it available. That's the legacy of Kennedy-era Lucasfilm in a nutshell. Just
That's
content so poorly conceived, so poorly received, that the corporation decided it was better to pretend it never existed. Beyond the movies...
What made me really mad is he ruined the reputation of the badass human from the original film, saying he was a deadbeat dad and shit. That's what I'm saying. I just... People always tell me, like, oh, Alana, it's just a conspiracy theory. There's no way they're, like, actually dehumanizing one gender and, like, empowering another at the detriment of, like, making men look bad so that women look better and, like, more powerful. And then it's like... But it's such a common trend. I'm sure there's someone who's autistic enough to, like, look in the last, I want to say 15 years and somehow categorically make, like, a list and then show if, like, if a show is remade, if yes or no, if they take the protagonist or one of the main, like, male characters and, like, dumb them down and make them look like a fucking retard. Like, there's gotta be some sort of trend, like, yes or no, and then, like, make, like, a sort of, like, just, like, a fucking list. That list exists already. Well, yeah, probably, because I said it. Like, I'm sure it doesn't take a genius to figure that one out.
And shows that actually made it to screens. One of Kathleen Kennedy's most damaging legacies is the trail of Star Wars projects that never existed at all. Announced with confidence, hyped at investor days and conventions, then quietly buried when reality set in. Under Kennedy, Lucasfilm developed a reputation for talking first and planning later. Standalone films, entire trilogies, bold new eras. Directors were paraded on stage, logos unveiled, timelines teased, and then months or years later, nothing, no updates, no releases, just silence. These were high-profile filmmakers who were publicly attached to Star Wars, only to vanish from the conversation entirely. Some left due to creative differences, others exited after scripts stalled, visions clashed, or the studio abruptly changed direction. The result was organizational instability. Lucasfilm became a place where projects went to die slowly, and over time, fans learned the lesson. Announcements stopped meaning anything.
That's honestly kind of the fate that Blizzard had as well. Like, working at Blizzard 20 years ago was like, oh my god, you fucking made it. Like, it's like a fucking big deal. Now it's like, oh, you work for Kathleen Kennedy and her fucking company? Oh boy. Oh, they made Star Wars and they made all the fucking sequels. Ugh.
Lucasfilm promised a new trilogy, audiences didn't care. When release dates were set, nobody believed them. That erosion of credibility is devastating for a franchise that once thrived on anticipation and trust. This constant cycle of hype and collapse also had a chilling effect internally. Creative talent learned that Star Wars wasn't a stable sandbox, but it was a political minefield. Scripts could be scrapped overnight, entire directions could be reversed mid-development. Meanwhile, leadership offered no consistent creative North Star to anchor anything long-term. What makes this worse is that these failures weren't the result of ambition alone. They were the byproduct of indecisive leadership, a refusal to commit to a vision, paired with an eagerness to announce one anyway. By the time Kennedy's tenure winds down, the damage is clear. Lucasfilm, more than ever, is defined by what it promised and never delivered. So how did it get this bad? How did a franchise this valuable, this durable, become so consistently mismanaged? You can't answer that honestly without addressing Kathleen.
Because corpos don't care about the soul. They just want to make money. That's all they care about. Graph must go up. Yo, Yeruri, thank you! Спасибо большое за рейдик. Hello, Russian fish brain cells were activated and swam to you. Ра-па-па-па-па. Спасибо большое. Мы смотрим видосы про Звездные войны. Yeah, I almost did Star Wars, and I was like, wait a minute. I almost did Star Wars. I mean, they would have understood anyway, but yeah, Vilsnet 1 is like the correct thing they have to say.
Kennedy's ideological gamble, the decision to fundamentally reposition Star Wars away from where it had historically been. Star Wars was always a boy-skewing brand. That isn't a good or bad thing, it's simply a market reality. Adventure, mythic...
This is supposed to be like a badass fight, and it just looks so slowly choreographed.
Heroism, simple moral clarity, pulpy spectacle, that's what built the audience. Instead of expanding the tent organically, Kennedy attempted something far riskier, rebranding the franchise itself by replacing it. Her public signaling made that clear. The Force is female was a branding statement, a message about who Star Wars was now for, and by implication, who it no longer centered. In the end, the problem wasn't female characters. Star Wars always had strong women. The problem was how they were written. Under Kennedy, many of the most criticized projects shared the same flaw. Protagonists who skipped struggle, bypassed growth, and arrived fully formed. Power was
jarring to a person who wants to get invested into a character, because ultimately, let's be real, the human desire to watch a movie so that you can put yourself into a character's shoes and think about, like, at least to me, to some extent, it's like, what would I do? Like, even if I see a female on the screen or a male on the screen, it doesn't matter to me the gender, I can be like, damn, that was fucking badass. If it's just given to them, like, all willy-nilly, it's like, that's not how reality works. Like, you gotta work for it at least a little bit, even in a fantasy universe.
Without cost, authority without earning it, stakes without consequences. Call it Mary Sue storytelling or call it lazy writing.
Sure
Either way, audiences rejected it because it broke the fundamental contract of myth-making. Instead of listening, leadership doubled down. Criticism wasn't treated as feedback, it was treated as an attack. Narrative weaknesses were defended as moral victories, and legitimate storytelling complaints were lumped together with bad faith actors to avoid addressing the core issue. The stories were shit. This was substitution, not inclusion, and substitution alienates more people than it attracts. Star Wars didn't fail because it added new perspectives. It failed because it prioritized messaging over mythology and ideology over craft, because Kathleen Kennedy misread the audience she inherited. And when you tell your most loyal fans...
she's not a writer. She's not a script writer. She's not like a person that's passionate about it. I'm sure she liked Star Wars. I'm not trying to accuse her of like not liking it, because like, I don't know, like, it feels like she absolutely said that she liked the movies and stuff as she worked on it. But I don't think she's creative, and I don't think she actually had the brain nor the actual, I want to say brain power, but like, I guess passion's the good word. She doesn't have the passion. That
the problem isn't the work, but them. Don't be shocked when they stop showing up. That's how a cultural juggernaut slowly loses its gravity. So now we arrive at the uncomfortable question Disney would very much like you to answer with optimism. Can Dave Filoni actually save Star Wars? His hiring has got some fans going Green Goblin right now. And maybe more importantly, is Star Wars even salvageable at this point? Filoni is often treated...
You'd have to literally scrap the entire thing and basically not make it canon. There's no shot.
Like a messianic figure by the fan base. The lore guy, the apprentice of George Lucas, the man who gets it. And to be fair, his resume is stronger than most of what Lucasfilm has put out in the last decade. But that's a low bar, not a ringing endorsement. The bigger problem is structural. Star Wars doesn't need another caretaker who loves the mythology. It needs absence, time, silence, a long enough gap for people to actually miss it again. That's how cultural icons regenerate, and anticipation can be rebuilt. But Disney won't allow that. Star Wars is...
that's what I'm saying. Disney won't allow that because it costs too much money, and if you just, like, basically, if you take too long, they're gonna fucking whip your ass and be like, damn, get back to work. I need money. I need a new Star Wars. Chop, chop, chop.
Assets,
Deadlines.
not a myth, and assets don't rest. Filoni also isn't the clean break people pretend he is. He's a product of the same system that hollowed this franchise out. His work leans heavily on callbacks, legacy characters, deep-cut lore, and self-referential storytelling that rewards homework rather than wonder. That might satisfy hardcore fans, but it does nothing to rebuild a broad, unified audience. Nostalgia is a crutch, and Filoni leans on it constantly. Even worse, his instincts skew inward. It's the animated logic ported awkwardly into live action. mythologication, or the mythology stacked on mythology until the stories collapse under their own weight. That's how franchises quietly fossilize. So, can Filoni save Star Wars? No, not really. At best, he can stabilize the patient, keep the heartbeat steady.
I thought Twi'leks were really fucking cool up until they did this whole entire shindig with this chick. I was like, damn, fucking cringe.
Slow the bleeding. But revival requires humility and a willingness to stop producing content long enough to reset expectations. Disney won't do that, which means...
She's not a Twi'lek? She's a Togruta. Oh, yeah, sorry. I confused the names. My bad. Sorry. I'm not that much of a nerd. I know some of the race names. Yes, you're right. It's not Twi'lek. It's a Togruta.
Filoni isn't here to resurrect Star Wars. He's here to manage its decline, more gently than Kathleen Kennedy did, but decline all the same. When history looks back on Kathleen Kennedy's reign at Lucasfilm, it won't be kind. And no, not because fans were toxic. It's because the results speak for themselves, and they are devastating. Kennedy presided over the systematic erosion of trust in some of the most beloved intellectual properties ever created. Star Wars was fractured, Indiana Jones was humiliated, Willow was erased, and Lucasfilm became synonymous with chaos, cancellations, and creative incoherence. These were symptoms of long-term mismanagement, unchecked ego, and a refusal to course correct. What makes her legacy so irredeemable isn't failure alone, it's the deflection. At every turn, responsibility was outsourced. To fans, to culture, to expectations, to imagine bad actors online. Never inward, never structural, never her. That victim complex poisoned the conversation and prevented meaningful self-reflection, ensuring the same mistakes were repeated again and again. And now, at the end, there's no victory lap or reclaimed goodwill. No undeniable triumph to point to and say, this made it all worth it. Just a fractured audience.
And I've noticed this too with like action scenes nowadays. Like, there's so many fucking cuts compared to what they used to do in like the 90s to 2000s, maybe like early 2000s. Everything, they do these like directions of these scenes with the fights, and it's like constant like they collide and then it like instantly shoots to another angle. It's like, bro, like it's so... What am I, a fucking... You need jingle keys in front of my face? In an action scene?
And a studio desperately clinging to its last remaining lifelines. Kathleen Kennedy will no doubt be defended by industry insiders, shielded by resumes and box office spreadsheets. But cultural impact isn't measured in quarterly earnings. It's measured in what survives you. And what survives her tenure is the tale of what happens when ideology...
Need instant gratification to keep those shareholders happy.
Arrogance, and corporate insulation replace humility, storytelling discipline, and respect for the audience, something that was entirely her own doing. And Lucasfilm will be cleaning up the wreckage.
He made a movie that he didn't even expect to do well. But because it was so well written and the actors that he got and the music, honestly, I genuinely think that the music in Star Wars and a lot of the like the late 80s, early 80s up to like I want to say the 2000s, they had amazing music, and I don't think they would have been nearly as successful as they were
for years to come.
John Williams, yeah, he's an amazing
fucking rocket science, but none of you would know about rocket scientists because you're all fucking retards, probably.
Probably. Oh gosh. Yeah, go check them out, man. That was a big one. It was a big video. I don't know. Corpo's fucking they just take a shit on everything we love, and it's all for the money. The money.